How can I go against my Quran? I can't do that. When you ask me why I do this, I do it because I'm a Muslim. My own children were targeted. They are not on social media anymore. And I can't put pictures of my children. I can't be a normal American grandma because I stood up.
Anila says she does this because I'm a Muslim, that she sees Jewish people as natural allies, and that moderate Muslims who stand with Israel face death threats.
The root of all of this is that they use Israel as a bait to get Muslims and teach them the grievance ideology. And I said, well, I'm going to go to Israel. And I did. That's exactly what I'm fighting. I'm fighting to reclaim my religion from these extremists who have stolen it. Hamas cannot represent Islam. People like me are very few. I have death threats. I can't even go to Muslim gatherings. I have to be really careful. Can a normal Muslim woman do this?
Welcome to another episode of the Soothing Semantics Podcast. I am your host, Rafi Harel, and today we have a wonderful guest who I met at the Combat Antisemitism, or CAM Summit, several days ago. We have Anila Ali, who is a Pakistani-born Muslim who is proudly pro-Israel, proudly a friend of the Jewish people, and has done tremendous work to bridge the gap between the two groups, which is a much needed thing, especially nowadays. So it was really a pleasure to meet you in person. I'm glad we got to do that before we sat down for the podcast. We didn't get to talk as much as we probably should have, but nonetheless, that's why we're here now. Right?
We'll do it now.
That's correct. That's for sure.
Thank you for having me, Rafi. What an honor and a pleasure to be here.
Yeah, it says read AI meeting notes, enter the waiting room. Is that connected to you or something?
Oh, no, it shouldn't be. I'm not doing anything of the sort.
Okay, so then I'll just...
just remove them. Do we have to start again?
No, that's perfectly fine. We'll just cut that part out. Okay. So just a couple of things that I want to get into with you. Like I mentioned, I had Rahil Raza on the show. I had a Dr. Zudi Jasser on the show, and you said you know both of them very well, especially Rahil. And the first thing that a lot of my viewers are probably wondering is why. Like it's something that's tough to do. A lot of the people that come from Pakistani background, at least, don't share the same views as you do, at least from what I understand.
Yes. Well, that's a very good question, Rafi. Why am I doing what I think all Muslims should be doing? When you hear of the Abraham Accords, that's a sacred document. And it brings all the shared values between Islam, Judaism, and Christianity. Patriarch Abraham was our patriarch as well. And as long as I have been, alive, and I pray to God every day, 5 times a day, asking God to bless Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him, and his family, like God has blessed Abraham, peace be upon him, and his family. So when you ask me why I do this, I do it because I'm a Muslim. And I grew up in a Pakistan which you don't hear about, which you don't see. And, especially the younger generation. I was the first generation of Muslims born in, when after partition, 1947, India and Pakistan were born. And at that time, I was lucky enough to be the daughter of enlightened moderates who came to Pakistan knowing the religion fully well, knowing that Islam is a continuation of the monotheistic religions. It's an Abrahamic religion, and that we cannot have a Pakistan just for the Muslims, because we believe in pluralism. We are the Indus Valley civilization. That's what I saw my grandmother do. So I was a little girl. I went to a Catholic school, and I was waiting for the bus every morning. And my grandmother would have the Quran open. And she was a big Sufi leader in India. And then in Pakistan, she became a huge Sufi leader. She was also a Muslim woman, first, the first Muslim woman to be elected to a Hindu Congress in India before India and Pakistan were separated. And her teachings were about the Abrahamic unity that we have inherited. And so she would teach me from the Quran the story of Abraham, the story of Moses, the story of Noah, the story of Adam, the story of Yaqub, and the 12 tribes of Israel. And so for me, I was learning Islam through her enlightened vision of Islam, vision of our world. So I think I'm very fortunate to have inherited that from my father, from my grandmother, and all the leaders that were around at that time. And so I come to America, and can you believe it's at that time I learned there was a word called anti-Semitism. For me, it was like, you can't hate people of the book. You have to, you live together, you have to coexist. And for me, Israel was a land of the prophets. And in the Quran, Israel, the children of Israel, God gave the land to Moses and said, go reside therein forever. And so how can I go against my Quran? I can't do that. And I looked at everything from the beginning. My family had always said, we are people of the book. Muslims, Jews, Christians, and many other monotheistic religions. They also come in under the same pluralistic umbrella. And we've lived together for thousands of years. We have a shared history in the Indus Valley civilization. And we can't go beyond that and start hating the Jewish state just because somebody tells us to. We have to look at our own religion. If we are Muslims, we have to really understand, is there any other way but peace? I don't think so. I think there's only one way. If you really want, peace, you're going to work towards it. And that's what I started doing when I realized that there's something called anti-Semitism and that we have to fight it. For me, the Jewish people were my natural allies. I went to a Catholic school. So for me, it was, everything that I believed in, everything that I stood for, it was anti-Semitism was a contradiction to all of that. And that's why I still fight. And I stood up for the state of Israel because I believe it has a right to exist. And the day, we do that as Muslims, we accept Israel's right to exist, Palestinians will have a state.
Yeah, it's interesting how much it reminds me, the things you're saying remind me of Rahil's experience in many respects.
We went to the same school together. She was my senior, but we went to a school called St. Joseph's Convent in Karachi. And, we grew up singing hymns. Our parents didn't say, oh, don't sing hymns because you're going to become a Christian. No, they said this is people of the book, Ahle Kitab. As Muslims, we believe in all of the prophets, all of the messengers. In fact, the Quran says God has sent more than 124,000 messengers to the world. And it just happened Prophet Muhammad, whom we think as our follow, and he is our last messenger, just happens to be in Arabia. But all the others, they were in the land of the children of Israel. And that's what you see in the Quran. So anyone who is erasing the history of Israel and the Jewish people and their direct connection to that holy land is doing injustice to Islam and our holy book, because that's what we believe in.
So here's the thing, though, because there's such a major disconnect between moderate Muslims like yourself and then extremist Muslims, extremist Islam. And to play devil's advocate, this is the kind of person I am, and this is the kind of show I run. The more research I do, I understand that there's this idea of abrogation. There's this idea that when Muhammad's army was weaker, he spoke words of peace. And then when his armies became stronger, there was more aggressive rhetoric, at least in Hadith. Or I'm not an Islamic scholar, and that's why I would like to ask you. Hopefully, you'll have some better ideas for me. But it's like on one hand, I'm so supportive of people who are peaceful. Believe in whatever you want, as long as you want good for me. I'm happy to want good for you. We live in harmony. Wonderful, fantastic. Pray 5 times a day, 10 times a day. Pray to whatever you want. The issue is really when a group of people doesn't accept me because of my beliefs. And so when it talks about the infidels, or it has all this other rhetoric about Gharqad trees. I don't have to tell you any of this. I'm sure you're familiar. How do you make sense of that? Like, how do you say, is that disregarded? Is it folklore? How do we think about that?
Rafi, that's exactly what I'm fighting. I'm fighting to reclaim my religion from these extremists who have stolen it. You know, the Prophet of Islam, he said every century there will be a reformer because Islam will be in decline. Those are his words. And there were scholars like Nablusi. He lived in Syria, Damascus, and he was so disillusioned with the decline of Islam and the decay of morality. He used to call this out, that he left the world and went into isolation for 7 years. And he came back and he started talking about exactly what I'm talking about, that we need to look at our own selves, and we need to reform our inner selves before we can do anything. To be a good Muslim, we need to start with ourselves. And that, you know, the moral decay that you see, Hamas cannot represent Islam. But a lot of times Muslims are standing with Hamas flags, and I don't get that either. All I see is a pattern from the 10th century, from the 12th century to the 11th century, down to the 16th century of Muslim. They were mujaddids. You know, they had come in to say, we need a reform. Somebody has stolen Islamic ideals. And they tried. And many of them were killed. Many of them were murdered. But there were brave ones like Nablusi who wrote. Then there were ones in the whole Indian subcontinent like Shah Waliullah. He came and he looked at Aristotle, his ideas, like he was looking at all these Greek philosophers and saying what's happened. And he believed in the universality of religion. And that's why you had a whole bulk of these Muslims in South Asia who were not radicals. We are non-Arabs. And we had read the writings of Shah Waliullah. We had read the writings of Bulleh Shah, and many Muslim, Sufi, enlightened scholars who had come, and they had said, no, that path is towards decaying, and moral decay is not okay. And this is the path of enlightenment. They wrote books. They talked about universality of religion. And that meant more than the monotheistic umbrella. That meant you as a Muslim will live with your non-monotheistic neighbors too. And that includes, the Hindus. And therefore, you find these small pockets of civilizations that are still existing in Pakistan, in India. You have the people of Kailash. Then you have people who don't have a religion. They are also in Chitral and all of these areas. But yes, there have been leaders in the Muslim world, in Islamic history, that have come and said, no, there is only one way. And that is the way of that weird, like the Salafi way, the Wahhabi way. No, that is not Islam. Because when the Prophet, in his last sermon, when he talked, he said clearly, I have perfected this religion for you, follow it, be good to your neighbor. And he talked about women, be good to women, treat them like you're equal human beings. And he said, don't discriminate. And he clearly, also in the Quran, it states, when somebody tells you, why are you following Islam and this and that, you tell them, to me, mine, and to you, yours. And don't fight with the Ahle Kitab. Don't fight with the Jews and Christians. Now, a lot of these verses are there, and they have been cherry picked. They have been taken over the years, and they have been used by the Islamists. The Islamists are the ones who have radicalized our young people. And I say, I think this is a time for, introspection in the Muslim world. Even people like I talk about it to Muslims, and I say we have to look at what beliefs we have adopted from this Islamist ideology. That's an ideology that you're following, and it was rejected every time it came into Main Street Islam. There were scholars who rejected it. This Ibn Taymiyyah, his toxic ideology, which is what is Al-Qaeda, Muslim Brotherhood, Hamas, all of them have taken bits and pieces to make it sound like Muslims just want themselves to be in power in the world. They want this Islamic caliphate, and that they cannot live in the West. Whereas if you look at what the Prophet and the first Caliph, Umar was the second Caliph, when he conquered, he conquered Jerusalem, and he goes there, and he goes to the Church of Holy Sepulchre, and the priest comes and says, well, do you want to pray inside? You can go and pray inside. Don't pray outside. He said, no, I will not pray inside, because if I do, my people will. Now, if that was abrogation, I challenge these Islamists to challenge Caliph Umar. He was alive at the time of the Prophet, and there were battles, there were things that happened that perhaps I wish they hadn't happened in the history, that we could say, yes, we were exemplary Abrahamic people. But yeah, there are things that happen. I wish they hadn't happened. But then you have Caliph Umar coming to Jerusalem and saying, no, I'm not going to pray outside. And he fought to bring the Jewish people that the Romans had sent, fought for them to come back. Okay. Mm-hmm. And then if you look at the example of the Prophet in Medina, okay, there were 2 times that Islam and the Prophet, Muslims, were saved by monotheistic people. First time was when the Prophet was being persecuted by his own people in Mecca, and he sent them to the Abyssinian king. He was Najashi, he was Christian, and he said, go and read them the verse on Mary. And when they did, he said, welcome, and he gave them refuge. First time Islam is saved by a Christian king. The second time is more important. Islam started in Medina, right? That was where the Jewish tribes lived. Okay. Right. And I can tell you something, Rafi, we don't know, as Muslims, we have to educate ourselves. We don't even know enough about our Prophet, who he was, where he came from, and how and why he was giving this message of Abrahamic unity, because he was a Hanafi. He came from the Arabs who were connected to Abrahamic, the line, the heritage. And he wanted to bring monotheism back. And his great-great-great-grandmother, Salma, was Jewish. His mother was from a Jewish tribe in Medina. And that is why the Medina people, who are Jews, Christians, and pagans, they said, Prophet of Islam, come to Medina. We will give you refuge. Islam's calendar begins at that time. And yes, after that, yeah, political and Islam, and then, you have a growing faith, and you invite people. And then, we all know what happens when politics gets into religion. But if if anyone challenges me and says Islam is saying that, I tell them, okay, prove it to me, because you can't. We have many, many scholars who've written about this and who have fought Ibn Taymiyyah's ideology, and even thrown it. In the 12th century, they threw his ideology. They hid it because they said this is not Islam. And now, everybody tends to think that Islam is that. And yes, I know there is a problem in the Muslim community, especially here in the United States, We have been radicalized. Our youth are being used. And how? You know that, Rafi. I talked about that. Our mosques have been taken over by the Qatari money coming in. And it's not 1 year. It's from the time I came here 30 years ago. I saw the infiltration of all this money. First, it was Wahhabi money, and then it was Qatari money, because Saudi Arabia and UAE both banned Muslim Brotherhood. They realized they're not good for their kingdom and they're not really good for Islam. So they banned them. But other Muslim countries didn't follow. And in our mosques, we did not root them out, because they're running many of the non-profits that support the mosque. And their goal is to subvert America. They're not following the Islam that I follow. My Islam is very different to theirs. So that's the basic issue.
Right, I hear you. I just don't understand these, like, because I know that you have good intentions, but when I hear about, for example, Sahih al-Bukhari, for example, and from what my understanding, it's not exactly so peaceful to Jews. Is that not accurate? Like, there are millions of people, millions of Muslims around the world who take that at face value, who really listen to that.
Yeah.
And so, is that a truth in Islam, or is that folklore that we ignore?
Well, let me tell you what the custodian of the Holy Mosque, our Holy Land, is in Saudi Arabia. And we follow our custodian, Crown Prince MBS. He said in his statement that a vast majority of those sayings of the Prophet, the Hadith, are not accurate. The only ones that are accurate are the ones that whose transmission was mutawattir. That means it was like you can prove it, and it was the Prophet, and then it was his relative, and you can prove it. But he said the vast majority of those sayings of the Prophet, they were written 200 years after. So he said they are not. But what happened over the years is that a lot of caliphs, a lot of rulers, they actually got scholars to concoct some of them to serve their own purpose, for their own political power. And there were different kingdoms that did that. And I'm not going to quote exactly which kingdom, but there have been many instances where it has been used. The Prophet said this. No. And many of the ones that you hear about the Jewish people, they are totally inaccurate. And also Islam has something called ijtihad. It's a big concept, principle in Islam, which the Prophet encouraged us to do, was use your good judgment. And that meant taking Islam, and like I practice Islam in the West, I live in America. You have to follow the constitution of the country that you live in. You can't impose your likes and dislikes on people that, you are actually being given a safe refuge. It's a privilege to live here. And what are you becoming? You're becoming a nuisance to this country. And so the Prophet clearly said that, follow the law of the land. In fact, earlier on, after 9/11, when this topic was also, is Islam compatible with the West? There were many more moderate imams who were speaking out and standing with the Jews and Christians at that time and saying, we don't subscribe to the Al-Qaeda ideology, and Islam, is not in conflict with the constitution, and they would write fatwas. We had one of our imams do that. But unfortunately, it's sad for me to say that there are hardly any Muslim leaders in America today that will stand up and say that. Then that's a travesty to a beautiful religion, the one that I follow, the one that people in the UAE follow, people in Morocco follow that, people in Azerbaijan follow that, Uzbekistan follow that. Those are the role model countries that we have to look to know that, look, Islam was not like this. In America, they have started following this perversion of our faith. And that's time for people like me, the moderate Muslims, have to speak up. And they have to also learn about their religion. You can't find Islam on TikTok. And you can't expect to learn about Islam on TikTok because a lot of it is sponsored by China, the Qataris, because they obviously want a radical version. There's this animosity against America. Why? Because people like you and people like me do well here. We love this country and we've come here for the right reasons. But then there was a whole lot of people. You may have heard the leader of the Council on American Islamic Relations. He said he has a 100-year plan for Muslims to take over America. He's not talking about Muslims like me, but he is talking about converting average Muslims like me into his ideological warriors, right? And that's what I'm seeing our young people do. They're standing, with Hamas flags and hating Jews and the horrible things that they are doing. They're not even, patriotic anymore. They think there's something wrong with the country, and they have been, fed this propaganda in the mosque. I heard it after 9/11, and I stood up as a mother, and I knew it because I lived in Saudi Arabia. And I was also told, well, you're going to America, Sister Anila, you're going to convert people to Islam. And this was not the Saudi Arabia that we know now. Thank God we have a mujaddid. I call him a reformer. But it was the Saudi Arabia where I got beaten. Why? Because I was not covering my hair properly. I was covering. And then my hands were beaten because I had nail polish and I was buying jewelry and trying it out. My ankles were beaten because I was wearing heels. And that's like I'm pretending to be Western. And I saw all of that. And that ideology made me think like, that's not where I come from. The Islam that we had in the Indus Valley civilization was not that. In Saudi Arabia, there was a woman. She was extremely well versed in Islamic ideology. And so she told me, Anila, her husband was an Islamic police, right? And so when I went to their house, of course, there would be me and her in a separate section and the husbands in a separate section. And I told her, I said, you know what? They're telling me that I should cover everything. And I'm not used to that because my grandmother's a Muslim scholar in India and then Pakistan, and she doesn't do this. And we've never done this. She said, don't worry about them. Because when the Prophet of Islam, he had his warriors were going to spread the message of Islam, when they were told specifically to respect the culture that they are trying to take over. And that is why, you have South Asia, Indian Muslims lived for centuries. They were rulers. The Muslims were the minority Mughals ruling a Hindu majority area. And they did okay. There were problems, but yeah, they did fine. And then the British came, and you know what happened. But you don't have these kind of radicals saying, hate the Jewish people, persecute the Christians. You didn't have a lot of that. And all of that seeped in, I would say, starting with the Wahhabi dollars. And it has infiltrated the non-Arab world. And of course, America, we have a huge problem. And yeah, there needs to be more people like me coming out and saying, and I think it's growing, Rafi, we have to hope for the best. Otherwise, our future is dim. As Muslims, I don't see our kids getting into national security jobs, getting into the military, because nobody's going to trust us. Nobody's going to trust us as physicians because of all the things that the doctors and nurses who are claimed to be Muslims are doing. You have actually dirtied these professions that are so noble by, anti-Semitism in the healthcare, holding up Hamas flags and saying, Intifada and Nakba. All of those are such like vile acts of hate, especially in healthcare, how could you do that? And so we are going to suffer. It is going to be our kids. And that's my fight, that I didn't come to America to hate anyone. I came here to live as a Muslim because I felt I could speak as a Muslim freely. And now I have to defend my faith from these Islamists and from these crazy radicals.
I just think there's a really big issue in the Muslim world with a lack of reformation, and the problem is I think moderate Islam to many is not as enjoyable. It's not as enticing. It's not as sexy as extremist Islam. Unfortunately, I think there's a big push for it. I think also many moderate Muslims just don't have the fight in them. They don't have the same drive. They don't have this kind of mujahid spirit, so to speak, right? Whereas in the Jewish world, you do have in Israel, for example, you have a strong fighting spirit. They don't want to lose the land, but it's very much defensive. You know, they'll try to paint this picture that we want the greater Israel. The vast majority of Israelis have no interest in going to war. They do
Yeah.
not want to be in the military. They want to go to either college or have a career, make money. It's not this desire to push a religious idea. I mean, you do have very religious fueled Jews, but for the vast majority, they don't want to go to any sort of war. They don't want to be in any sort of armed conflict.
Yeah.
And
No,
I just
Rafi, I agree with you. I hear
Mhm.
what you're saying, and that's like I don't want to feel disillusioned with like I can't do anything because then I'll be in despair. But I feel that there is, people like CARE and Muslim Brotherhood, they have won. They won on 9/11, Al-Qaeda, and they
Right.
won on October 7th when our moderate Muslims were telling me the Jews deserved it, right? And that was what motivated me to stand up. But at the same time, there is, it's not huge, but there's a wave of Muslims, especially people living in Texas. We are growing the numbers. We are empowering the Muslims who are like me. It's not easy. Muslims are a lot of Muslims in the world, and people like me are very few because of the fact that when you go to the mosque or when you go to Muslim gatherings, I have death threats. I can't even go to Muslim gatherings. I have to be really careful. Uh, can a normal Muslim woman do this? No, you have to come from where I come from. I saw my grandmother. She was a leader. My father was a leader. They were founding fathers and mothers of Pakistan. So I saw Islam in a very different light. And that's my fight. But a normal person who came here, they're afraid of who's in the mosque. They intimidate people. There was an event that we were doing. It was called Breaking Bread. Muslims,
Mm.
Jews, and Christians coming together in California.
Didn't Rahil take part in this? I'm pretty sure she mentioned it. Does that check
No,
out?
it was Rahil was not there, but hopefully she'll come to our anti-Semitism conference on July 13th. She's one of our keynotes. But this event was just a simple way to say, California, we're coming back. We're going to fight this radical ideology that's in the mosque. And an imam, a pastor, and a rabbi. They were going to break bread, and we were all going to speak. Loai al-Sharif was there. He'd flown in from
Lovely.
UAE, and we had a really honest discussion about what's happening. And what did the Muslim Shura Council did? What did these radicals do? All these mosques came together to boycott me and Soraya, one of my colleagues who was also there. And they said, these two Muslim women. Now, 9/11, when I stood up against Al-Qaeda and I spoke up for the moderate Muslims, they did the same thing. And then in 2014, when I actually, said, okay, the root of all of this is that, they use Israel as a bait to get Muslims and teach them the grievance ideology. And I said, well, I'm going to go to Israel. I'm going to go to Israel and be the first Muslim woman and Pakistani to take a group of people. And I'm going to, go and check it out. And I did. And the day I had also run for office, and these people, this CARE group, and all of these people, the Islamists, they came to me and they said, okay, if you're going to run for office, you want us to support you, drop your support for Israel. And I said, I don't have a problem with Israel, and I'm not dropping my support for Israel. This was 2014. The same thing happened 2016. And I said, look, I'm from Pakistan. We don't really have any problems with Israel. We have, we have our own issues, but no, I was never brought up to hate that land. I believe belongs to Israel. And so they like got after me. And how many moderate Muslims can tolerate Muslim Brotherhood coming after them, not letting my board, half of them resign on October 7th because they were told that they can't come to the mosque. They can't go places. They were targeted. My own children were targeted. They are not on social media anymore. And I can't put pictures of my children. I can't be a grandma. I can't be a normal American grandma because I stood up. They harass Muslims who stand up. So unless and until we bring down this structure, the misogynistic, anti-Israel, anti-Semitic, anti-everybody else, anti-American organizations, and we don't investigate how they're getting their funding, where it's coming from, then Muslims like me will not rise, because not everybody can do what I'm doing. That's the problem.
It's just a shame that you're in the United States and you can't do that.
Imagine. Actually, when I go to Pakistan, I feel safer. Why? Because there are more Pakistanis who know Ahle Kitab concept, who know people of the book. I've been with Jewish people to Pakistan. My partner was Jewish. She went to the villages in Pakistan and she said, I am Yahud. I am, children of Moses. They said, we love you. Please, don't think like we love you. These were the villagers who knew what was in the Quran, and it wasn't diluted by the Muslim Brotherhood ideology. So that land is different. The South Asians are different. And I say this, I say this to Jewish people all the time. Find, non-Arab allies that you can work with, so that, because they have less of the intimidation from their own community. Because in my community, there are a whole teams of journalists who have gone with me to Israel, and they've come back, they've lost their jobs, Rafi. They have lost everything, and they've lost family members and best friends. And yet they are fighting. They're fighting this good fight. So yes, you won't hear about them, but they are with me. They've been writing in the Times of Israel. We have, I think, 8 or 9 Muslim journalists who are writing for the Times of Israel. Why? Because they believe in it. We have Pakistanis writing in the Times of Israel. So there are fighters, and, but we need to take down this organization, the Muslim Brotherhood proxies, so that people like me are not afraid. They can come out. And there are plenty of us. When we can go to the mosque and somebody doesn't say, oh, you're with AMMWEC, so you can't come into the mosque. That's unconstitutional. They are non-profits. Investigate them. Mm-hmm. And then you'll have Muslims rise. Now people are calling me and saying, okay, I'm not with Mamdani, and can I come and join you in the protest? And I like that. People are realizing it's gone beyond. Don't take Islam to that level. You degrading our religion by doing all of this hatred, praying this misogyny outside a Jewish girls' school. It's not prayers. You're actually distracting people from praying. You want to pray? Go pray in a mosque. There are plenty of mosques in America. Why are you threatening little girls? That's not Islam. And some people are seeing it that way. So a very important thing, Rafi, is to empower this moderate Muslims kind of revolution coming out and standing up to this hate and anti-Semitism and Islamism.
Yeah, I actually think that a major component for peace between the two is moderate Muslims pushing against extremist Islam, and then at the same time, tough Jews helping to teach other Jews to be tougher. Because I think a major issue in the Jewish world, especially in the diaspora, is timidity, is fear. In Israel, you tend to have a lot of tough Jews who serve in the military and are willing to put themselves in harm's way. In the US, a lot of Jews aren't like that. And so I think two things are happening at once. There's a simultaneous experience. The fundamentalist Muslims take advantage of the useful idiot as a Jew, pro-Palestine person, and the strong Jews and the moderate Muslims actually have a tremendous potential to have peace together. You're in a conference full of a lot of very tough Jewish people. They're not people who don't like you. They're people who, like me, once they understand what you're all about, very much appreciate and cherish what you're doing. And so you would think that a moderate Muslim and a strong-minded Jew would maybe clash. Very much the opposite. I think that's really where the harmony is. It's an identity thing, right? And because strong Jewish people, that you have some fundamentalist Jews, they exist, but for the most part, it's a minority.
Yes.
So I think we have to both do our parts, and there's a lot of I have a bunch of friends that are doing it on the pro-Israel side,
Mm-hmm.
and
Yeah. No, you're right, because, there are many Jewish friends who were liberal and they left us. They said, oh, you're Israel or Bibi Netanyahu. I said, that's politics. These people are dividing us based on our religion. And I said, you can keep politics aside. I lost a lot of liberal Jewish friends too in this.
you didn't lose much. You didn't lose much, unfortunately. It's probably a shame. I'm saying you might have liked them very much, but
I like them. And I was
they
like,
might be wonderful. They might be wonderful people outside of politics, but when you bring, they're some of the most stone-headed people. It's unfortunate. There's a very, very deep-seated generational thing that many Jews have, particularly from European background, where they really can't stand the idea of being disliked. They have this insanely, they have this deep desire that they can't be disliked. They hate it. If you don't like me, my world falls apart. They can't just do something and ignore the outside noise. Everything around them is just caving in on them, and they have to give in. It's like, oh, people don't like me. What can I do? How can I cater? How can I appease you so that you like me? And it's a perpetual state of, please like me, and nothing they do works, and it frustrates them. And instead of looking inward, they blame other Jews for them being disliked.
I hear that. If only all of the Jewish people stood with us after 9/11 and understood what we were saying about all these proxy organizations, that, you go into the mosque and all of a sudden, there's a terrorist attack and a Muslim has committed it. Instead of, introspecting or saying, this is wrong and this is wrong, they would say, oh, but then the Yahud, they'd blame it on America and the Jews. And when I would tell my liberal Jewish friends, I lived in California once, and they would say, oh, no, but that's not a bad organization. That's a Muslim organization. I said, just because it's a Muslim organization doesn't make it halal or kosher. It's not. And if they had listened and stood with us at that time, we would have been stronger and many things would have been different. But let's not look back. Even now, I feel, if we can have like a strong Jewish voice and we can have a strong Christian voice with us, and Muslims like me empower organizations like ours, Muslims are waking up. It's happening. But, as long as our government is doing its part of shutting down these proxies, and we all know the money is still coming in. Why is it coming? That's why the Deterrent Act is something I'm pushing. We don't want these campuses, our young people on the campuses have been brainwashed. And I saw that happening. When I came here, my son was at UCLA. It was his first year. and I was a public school teacher. And he called me and he said, Mom, somebody came knocking at my door at 5 a.m. and said, get out, pray. And, and he said, Mom, that's not how you do it. Like, why are they doing this? And I said, no, tell them never to come. Tell them they cannot do that. There's no la ikraha fi din. There is no compulsion in religion, and they should not be doing that. It's not like we're not living in Afghanistan. This is America. And I taught my son. And there was a time 2 years after that he was on Fridays when he would go for prayers. He would say, Mom, I can't find this mosque. The same thing is being said. Anti-Americanism, anti-Semitism, anti-Israel. And he couldn't find a mosque in LA that he could listen to the sermon. So he stopped listening to the sermons and he said, I'm just going for my prayers and getting the hell out. And I'm seeing the same thing with moderate kids, Muslims, who have raised kids like I have, especially from my part of the world. Those kids are getting it. So they go into the mosque, they pray, and they get the hell out. They don't listen to the toxic sermons, but that's not a solution. The solution is that our government looks at these nonprofits, investigates, and that we, as a combined religious group, Muslims, Jews, Christians, Hindus, we visit each other's mosques in our neighborhoods to see if they're teaching our kids to hate or to love. Because in the end, it's about where you living here. Your neighbors could be Hindus, could be Christians. You have to teach them to love each other and be better American citizens. And they're not even doing that. You know what's happening in New Jersey. Some of the most toxic imams went there and called for the annihilation of the Jewish race. And nobody said anything about it. How can they get away with this? How can they get away with this? So that's what I'm pushing. I'm pushing for more accountability of these organizations, and that money on these campuses must stop. It should go towards Abraham Accords for young people, interfaith, unity, and those kind of programs that we can do with Muslim organizations and Hillel and whatever Christian organizations. That's how we have to teach our kids going forward. And we do have programs like that, and hopefully we can start some of those. We're a small nonprofit. We're not huge, but we have a good voice. We have a good, loud voice. And, people like you, I ask you to empower the moderates. I can't hear you, Rafi. You're on mute.
Yeah. I said I'm a very positive person, but it's a tough uphill battle.
Oh, yeah.
I do think, though, there needs to be a combination of not brutality, but there needs to be a zero tolerance policy for terrorism, like in Saudi Arabia, in Dubai. If countries really want peace, if people are really serious about peace, if a country like Pakistan actually wants peace, then they have to crack down on extremism physically, not just having conversations. Now, the conversations are wonderful. I wish everything could be solved by dialogue. That would be great.
Yeah.
But sometimes you need to say, Hamas is not welcome here. Hezbollah, Al-Qaeda, Al-Shabaab, Fatah. Quite frankly, there's a lot on the list. It's quite a big laundry list of these groups.
Yeah, the tip of the iceberg, but there are many.
These groups have to be completely outlawed in order for that to change. But there's so many hotbeds. Yeah. Much of Africa has these groups. Much of the Middle East has. Almost every country in the Levant has a terrorist group. I mean, pretty much all of them. Yemen, Iraq, Syria, Jordan, Lebanon,
Algeria,
all of them.
All of them.
Tunisia to Egypt, they all have some kind of, guerrilla terrorist faction. It's tough,
Yes. No, I hear you. It is an uphill battle, but I do want to say that I think people are waking up, especially in America. People are realizing, okay, these are not authentic partners. We're going to drop them. and then we need to build authentic leadership, and one that actually counters radicalization I wrote a paper, and it was called How to Stop the Radicalization of Muslim Youth.
Mm-hmm.
And that, do you know how old that is? It's like more than 24 years old. And I presented it to the Obama administration. And there was this guy sitting in national security when I told him that I don't hear good things in the mosque being said to our young people. And I'm a mother, and I don't want my kids to be indoctrinated with anti-Americanism and anti-Semitism. And he said, well, it's First Amendment. So when you're going to put Muslim Brotherhood in charge in the White House, then what's going to happen? This is years and years of their work, Rafi. They did a good job of infiltrating all of our federal government offices, especially, completely wrecking our campuses. It was 2013 when Hillel, at the Cal State Fullerton, they said, we used to have a lot of Muslims come and have Shabbat with us. And now the professor, somebody turned around and said, don't go. And so, can you get some Pakistani, South Asian kids to come? And that's when I intervened in that campus. We built a whole program for campuses. It was called the Olive Tree Initiative, where we got a lot of young people who were interested in the conflict in the Middle East, but didn't know enough. We said, don't take sides, go there and find out. So we would take them to Israel. Then we would take them to Judea, Samaria. They would go to Gaza. Then they would come back equipped with knowledge, not biases. And I think we need to do that on campuses. You're really concerned about the Middle East crisis. Learn to be a peacemaker. Be equipped with knowledge, not sound bites, not stereotypical, hateful slogans. Go and be a peacemaker. Go and build bridges and learn how you can do that. And it's not just the Middle East. That there are so many issues. Conflicts are rampant in the Muslim world. And, we seem to be obsessed with just like one tiny state that the Jewish people have. For me, it's, given to them by God. It's the land of the prophets. And, we have to really, we have a real uphill battle ahead of us, but we need all the support that you can give us.
That's for sure. All we can do is be hopeful. I'm going to keep doing what I'm passionate about. And what I'm passionate about is supporting Israel, sharing the ideas that I know make a difference, not being this politically correct pro-Israel voice, saying having the difficult conversations.
Yes.
And what you're doing is incredibly important too. I hope more people join your team, because we need a hell of a lot more. We got millions of people we got to change the minds of. We have all these conflicts. So is there anything else that you quickly wanted to throw in? Anything that you're writing, any sort of article, book, or a website?
Yes. I'll just talk about our conference on combating anti-Semitism and hate is on July 13th. It's at the National Press Club. And there we are going to be introducing a new book, launching a book. And it's going to be the testimonials of the Muslims who've gone to Israel with us. And you'll hear a lot of those voices, and you'll see them, you'll meet them. What we're trying to build is Muslim allies for Israel and for the Jewish world. These are voices of reason, moral clarity. They're journalists, they are civic leaders, and they've taken a lot of slack for standing up for Israel. So you'll hear them. So please come join us, support us, and
where is the conference?
National Press Club in Washington, D.C., July 13th.
Okay, and where can people get tickets?
Oh, you can go to AMMWEC, www.ammwec.org, and you'll see our conference link. It's also on Eventbrite. And if you can just share that, Rafi, that would be great. We want you to come. We want there to be a room full of people, just standing room.
Are there going to be some people from the event that we went to? Is that a
Yes,
possibility?
yes. Combat anti-Semitism. As you know, or you may not know, I've been one of the first advisory board members of Combat Anti-Semitism. And so they are going to be there. Hadassah is my partners. And there's going to be a lot of people. Zach is going to be there. So come and stand with us. Let's stand together and show those people that, hate, we're gonna completely drown it with what we have to say, and that's unity, solidarity, love for America, love for each other.
Beautiful, beautiful. Anila, you're a wonderful person. It's so nice to meet you, and I want there to be more and more and more of this. This is
Inshallah, and you too, Rafi. I understand young people. We need Jewish young people to be on board with us. And I hope that happens too. It's very important to have your voice in our fight, because our fight is the same. We're fighting extremism, Islamism.
For sure. Ladies and gents, thank you for tuning in to my episode with Anila Ali. You can follow her. You're going to have the handle. This is pre-edit, but you're obviously going to have her Instagram handle when you're watching this video. Make sure to subscribe to the channel, leave a like, leave your comments. Of course, for all of your real estate needs in South Florida, I'd be happy to help you. And I hope you'll tune into the next episode. Until next time.